Hey friend, hit subscribe. Takes you a second, but it means the world to me. And please leave a comment on the RevengeVeil channel telling us which city you're watching this story from. That really helps the channel grow. Thank you. I hadn't even finished the coffee from the funeral, and she was already laughing in my mother's house. That sound, my sister's laugh, used to mean comfort. Now it just burned through the quiet like broken glass. The air still smelled of lilies and wax. The kind of silence that hangs around after grief leaves the room. My name is Margaret Hale, I'm 71, and last week we buried our mother, Evelyn Hale. We grew up in Savannah, Georgia, in a house with creaking floors and a magnolia tree that shaded the front steps. Mom kept everything. Every letter, every photo, every secret. In a blue box wrapped with twine and smelling faintly of lavender. That box was sitting on the table when I walked in. And my sister, Linda, was standing over it with a key I'd never seen before. My sister Linda said, "Mom wanted me to handle her things. You don't have to worry about it." I answered, "That's strange." She told me the same thing in her handwriting. She said, "You're imagining. You've always been too emotional about paperwork." The box clicked open. Inside, letters, a few photographs, and a folded will. She picked it up as if it were already hers. My sister Linda said, "See? It's all straightforward. The house goes to me. You get the jewelry. That's fair." I asked, "Fair by whose measure?" She smiled. "By hers. You were always too sentimental to handle money." I wanted to reach across the table and take it, not the paper but the arrogance that came with it. Instead, I stayed still. Mother hated scenes. The sound of the clock on the mantel was too loud, every tick like a warning. I noticed one thing my sister didn't. A second envelope under the lining of the box. Thin, sealed, and addressed to me. I slipped it into my pocket while she turned to make a call. Later that night, when the house emptied and her perfume still hung in the air, I opened the letter. Mom's handwriting. Shaky but deliberate. She wrote, "If they rush you, slow down. The truth will wait. The lawyer has the real one." I folded it back and pressed it against my chest. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known what would happen in this very room. When I walked past the table again, the box was gone. Linda must have taken it. All that was left was one lavender petal, damp from her fingers. I whispered, "You can have the box, Linda, but not the truth." That night, I slept with the letter under my pillow, the last thing my mother ever gave me. The next morning, the phone rang. It was the lawyer. He said the will had been contested. The call came just after sunrise. The light through the blinds was thin and gray, the kind that makes everything look temporary. Mr. Collins, our family lawyer, sounded tired. He said, "Margaret, your sister filed an objection. She claims the will we have isn't valid." I asked, "On what grounds?" He replied, "She says it was altered. That Evelyn wasn't of sound mind." I said, "She's the one who wasn't sound. My mother could still quote legal codes better than either of us." He sighed. "You'll need to come in today. Bring whatever you found in the house." I looked at the empty space on the dining table where the lavender box had been. I answered, "That might be difficult." By the time I reached downtown Savannah, the streets were already steaming from the morning heat. Colin's office was the same as always, quiet, smelling faintly of old paper and lemon polish. He sat behind a stack of folders, his tie slightly askew. "Mr. Collins said, your sister came here yesterday. She brought a document, says it's the final version. It's dated 2 weeks before your mother passed." I asked, "And?" He replied, "And it leaves the house, the savings, everything to her." I said, "Convenient timing." He nodded. "Too convenient. But we can't accuse her of forgery without proof." I took the letter from my purse, Mom's last message. The lavender scent was faint now, nearly gone, but the words still cut clean. I said, "She told me you had the real one, Mr. Collins answered. "Then let's find out." He unlocked a drawer and pulled out a brown envelope sealed with wax. Inside, the original will, signed months earlier, witnessed and notarized. He laid both versions side by side. The first line of Linda's version read, "I, Evelyn Hale, leave my estate to my beloved daughter Linda, who cared for me in my final days." The true one said, To my daughters Margaret and Linda in equal parts. Mr. Collins said. Different ink. Different font. She copied the form but not the spacing. A decent fake but sloppy. I asked. Can we prove she wrote it? He replied. If she's smart, she didn't do it alone. Someone helped. I said. She always finds someone to clean her mess. I folded my mother's letter and slipped it back into my purse. Mr. Collins said. We'll handle it legally. But keep quiet. Don't let her know we've seen this. I replied. You think I'd warn her? When I got home, the house smelled of rain again. Linda's car was parked out front. Inside, she was standing by the fireplace, holding one of Mom's framed photos. My sister Linda said, You went to Collins. I can tell by your face. I answered. Then you know he's seen your version. She laughed. You think I'm stupid enough to forge something? Please. I said. I think you're desperate enough. She stepped closer. Her perfume was sharp, something new, expensive, artificial. My sister Linda said, You were always Mom's favorite. You got the best schools, the trips, the attention. It's my turn. I answered. You call stealing a turn? Her hand brushed the cross around my neck. She said quietly, You don't deserve this either. Then she unclasped it and walked out with it, leaving the chain cold against my skin. I didn't follow her. Some silences are louder than shouting. That night, I found myself in the attic. Mom's handwriting was on every box label. Winter clothes, receipts, letters, keep. I opened the last one and found a stack of bank statements and receipts dated years back. All in Linda's name. Payments, withdrawals, transfers. All while Mom was alive. She'd been bleeding her slowly. I sat on the floor until dawn, my fingers smudged with dust and ink. Then I packed the receipts neatly, sealed them in an envelope and wrote on the front. For Mr. Collins, if anything happens to me. When I walked downstairs, the first thing I noticed was the scent of lavender again. Not from the box. From the drawer. The key was lying there. Linda had returned it, or she'd forgotten it. Either way, I took it as a sign. By the next morning, I had a plan. And for once, she wouldn't see it coming. By the time I reached Mr. Collins' office again, the air outside had turned heavy, humid, like a warning. He was reading through the receipts I'd found, his glasses low on his nose. Mr. Collins said, She's been drawing money for years. Small amounts, regular intervals. Always under your mother's name. I asked, Can we trace it? He replied, We already did. It went through a joint account, yours and hers, opened in 2017. Did you authorize it? I said, No. And my mother never would have signed anything without me. He leaned back. Then we've got her. We just need timing. If we move too soon, she'll hide what's left. I answered. Then let her think I've given up. That evening I called Linda. The rain had started again, soft and steady, tapping against the kitchen window like a heartbeat. I said, I'm done fighting. You were right. Mom wanted you to handle things. I'll sign whatever you need. My sister Linda said, You finally realized? I answered, I realized peace is cheaper than pride. She laughed. Good girl. She arrived the next morning early, perfume first, confidence second. She brought the lavender box with her this time like a trophy. My sister Linda said, I thought we'd do this properly. I called a notary. He'll meet us at noon. I replied, Perfect. Coffee? She said, Black, no sugar. I've got too much to handle today. Her tone was light, but her hands betrayed her. Restless, tapping the table always near the documents. The box sat between us and for a second I almost saw the two of us as we once were. Girls sitting on the floor, playing with paper dolls, waiting for Mom to call us for dinner. Then she said something that cut the memory clean. My sister Linda said, Mom always said you were too trusting. She wasn't wrong. Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. Not the notary. Mr. Collins walked in. Linda's smile froze. Mr. Collins said, Good morning, ladies. I just wanted to make sure everything is handled properly. My sister Linda said, I didn't invite you. He replied, No, but the court did. He opened his briefcase and laid out two documents. One, the verified original will with official seals. The other, A list of financial transfers, signed electronically by Linda's account. Mr. Collins said, "We traced every dollar. We also confirmed a forged signature from last month. The bank's compliance team will be in touch." My sister Linda whispered, "You tricked me." I answered, "No, you tricked yourself." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain hitting the roof. Linda reached for the lavender box, but I covered it with my hand. I said, "Mom left this house to both of us. You turned it into evidence." My sister Linda said, "You think this makes you better?" I replied, "No, just free." She grabbed her coat and left, slamming the door so hard the photo frames rattled. A petal from the flowers on the table fluttered to the floor, pale purple against the wood. Mr. Collins said, "You handled that well." I answered, "I wasn't trying to handle it. I was trying to end it." When he left, I opened the lavender box again. Inside, under the folded letters and faded photographs, was one more envelope. No handwriting this time. Just my name printed neatly, as if someone else had prepared it long ago. I opened it. Inside was a deed, transferring full ownership of the house to me, signed and witnessed, dated 6 months before Mom's death. She had seen this coming. Every step. I sat there until the rain stopped, sunlight slicing through the curtains, touching the edge of the paper. I whispered, "Thank you, Mom." That night I didn't sleep. The air felt lighter, but there was still something unfinished. Linda hadn't fought this hard just for property. She wanted control. And people like her never walk away quietly. So before dawn, I locked the deed in the safe and left the house lights on. If she came back, I wanted her to see I was awake and waiting. The rain had stopped, but the air outside still smelled of wet wood and something metallic, like the edge of a key. I hadn't told anyone, but I hadn't slept since that morning. I left the living room light on and sat near the window listening. At 12:43 a.m., I heard footsteps on the porch. Not the neighbor's cat this time. Heavy, slow steps. Then a single knock. I stood still, my breath caught somewhere between fear and anger. Another knock. Louder. When I opened the door, Linda was standing there. Her hair was damp, mascara smudged. Her jacket hanging loose at the shoulders. My sister Linda said, "We need to talk." I answered, "Now," she said, "before you ruin everything." She walked in without waiting, dripping rainwater on the rug. Her eyes darted around the room. At the lamp, the safe, the lavender box on the table. My sister Linda said, "You set me up with Collins. You embarrassed me in front of the bank." I replied, "You did that yourself." She said, "You always wanted to see me fail." I answered, "No, I just stopped cleaning up after you." She moved closer, voice trembling between rage and guilt. My sister Linda said, "They froze my accounts. Do you understand what that means? I have nothing." I answered, "You had enough when you took from Mom." She shouted, "I took what I deserved." The echo hit the walls and lingered. For a second we were both silent, just the ticking of the old clock breaking the air between us. I said quietly, "She forgave you for everything. Even when she knew. Why couldn't you leave it at that?" Linda's jaw tightened. She looked at the box again. My sister Linda said, "Because she never trusted me. And now neither do you." I replied, "You made sure of that." Her eyes glistened. "You don't understand," she whispered. "There's more. You think this is about money?" I waited. She didn't finish. Instead, she turned toward the door. My sister Linda said, "If you don't stop this, I'll make sure you regret it." I answered, "Threats sound smaller at night, Linda." She left, slamming the door behind her. I stayed there, hand on the handle, heart still racing. Outside, her car headlights swept across the windows, then vanished. I went to the table, opened the lavender box again. There was something new inside, a folded paper that hadn't been there before. My name, written in her handwriting. I unfolded it carefully. It said only 2 words. Check drawer. I froze. The bottom drawer of Mom's old dresser had always been locked, the key missing for years. But I remembered something. The small key I'd found in the kitchen weeks ago, left by Linda after the funeral, fit perfectly. Inside, a black envelope, thick, sealed with wax. And inside that, photographs. Old ones. Not of family. Of Linda. Meetings, people I didn't recognize. Receipts for cash payments. Copies of checks written from my mother's account to a company that didn't exist. I whispered, "Oh, Linda. What did you do?" The last page was a notarized form. A contract assigning full ownership of a property in Florida to someone named Harper Wallace. Under it, my mother's shaky signature. Forged. I sat on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in my hands. Mr. Collins' words echoed in my head. If she's smart, she didn't do it alone. Now I knew who Harper was. Mom's old caretaker. The one Linda insisted on hiring. It wasn't just greed. It was planned. I placed everything into a folder, sealed it, and wrote the date. Then I placed it in the safe beside the deed. The house felt colder after that. Even the air seemed thinner. I turned off the light and whispered to the dark. You wanted war, Linda. You'll have it. But not the kind you expect. Outside, a car door slammed again, too close this time. I didn't look through the window. Some truths don't need to be seen twice. By morning, I decided to stop being careful. She'd mistaken silence for weakness long enough. By morning, I'd already packed a small folder into my handbag. It held the photos, the fake contracts, and the receipt copies. Everything that tied Linda and that caretaker, Harper Wallace, together. I called Mr. Collins before sunrise. I said, I have proof. Not just of theft, of conspiracy. He replied, bring it in. Quietly. Downtown Savannah was waking up slow, the streets still wet, reflecting the pastel sky. I walked fast, clutching the folder tight against me. Inside the law office, Collins was waiting with two people I hadn't met, one from the state auditor's department, the other from the police's financial division. Mr. Collins said, Margaret, they're here to listen. Tell them everything. So I did. Every transfer. Every signature. Every time Linda showed up pretending to help Mom with bills. When I finished, one of them nodded slowly. The officer said, this isn't small. It's structured fraud. We'll need formal statements. I replied, whatever it takes. They took copies of the evidence and promised to keep me informed. As I left the building, the morning sun felt different. Not warm but clean, like it was cutting through something that had been thick for too long. By evening, Linda called. Her voice was sharp, brittle like glass about to crack. My sister Linda said, you went to Collins again. I know. I answered. Then you also know why. She said. You think you're clever? You don't know who you're dealing with. I replied. I've known all my life. She hung up without another word. That silence told me she was planning something. The next day, Harper Wallace showed up at my front gate. I hadn't seen her since Mom's funeral. She looked thinner now, tired, her uniform wrinkled. Harper said, Mrs. Hale, I didn't want to be part of this. Linda told me it was just paperwork. I asked, you signed those papers? She said quietly, I did. She promised to help me pay for my daughter's school. I never knew your mother's name was on them until later. I replied, and now? Harper said, now she's threatening to expose me. Please, I can't lose my job. I studied her face, pale, shaking. She wasn't lying. I walked to the porch, handed her a folded paper. I said, then help me. Write down everything you remember, times, places, names. I'll make sure they know you cooperated. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Harper whispered, she's dangerous, Mrs. Hale. She said she'd finish this before anyone else can. That night, I double-locked every door. Even the windows. At 2 a.m. I woke to the faint sound of gravel crunching outside. No footsteps. Just that, the slow, deliberate grind of tires on the driveway. I peered through the curtain. A black car. No lights. Engine off. Then, after a minute, it reversed and disappeared down the street. I stayed by the window until dawn. My hands were steady, but inside I felt the kind of quiet rage I'd never known before. The kind that doesn't shout, only waits. The next afternoon, I received a call from Detective Rivera at the Financial Division. He said, Mrs. Hale, we've reviewed your evidence. It's enough to issue a preliminary warrant, but we need one last confirmation. I asked, what kind? He replied, a direct transaction between Linda and the caretaker, anything recent. I smiled faintly. Then I'll give her the chance to make one. That evening I dialed Linda. I said, "You win. I'm tired. Come tomorrow. Bring whatever documents you want me to sign." She hesitated, then laughed softly. My sister Linda said, "I knew you'd come around. Noon then." I replied, "Noon works." After she hung up, I placed a small recording device under the table, the same one I'd once used with Mom to capture old family stories. I tested it twice. It clicked softly, red light steady. Then I sat by the window again, watching the magnolia branches sway under the wind. Somewhere out there, she was already planning how to make her entrance. She'd come smiling. She always did. But this time, the house wouldn't be hers to walk through. It would be a witness. The next day, at exactly 12:03 p.m., the sound of heels echoed on the porch. She was early. The clock on the mantel showed 11:58 when I heard the car door slam. 2 minutes early, typical Linda. Always needing to arrive first to feel in control. I stayed seated at the table, the recorder hidden under the stack of mail. The lavender box sat in the middle, lid open as if waiting. The front door open without knocking. My sister Linda said, "You didn't lock up. Brave of you." I answered, "I didn't expect burglars in daylight." She smirked. "Funny. You used to say that about me." She walked in with a leather folder, crisp white shirt, gold earrings glinting in the sun, looking every bit the confident woman she pretended to be. My sister Linda said, "Let's get this over with. You'll sign these and we'll finally be done." I asked, "Done with what, the house or the family?" She said, "Both if that's what it takes." She placed the folder in front of me. I didn't touch it. My sister Linda said, "Don't stall. It's the cleanest way out. You get some cash, I get closure." I replied, "Closure doesn't usually require lawyers and threats." Her tone sharpened. She said, "You think the police scare me? They don't have proof." I answered, "Then why are you here shaking?" She flinched, realizing her hand had started to tremble. Her eyes flicked toward the lavender box. My sister Linda said, "You kept it. Of course you did. You always keep everything, letters, grudges, dead things." I replied, "Only what still matters." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she sat down opposite me, flipping through her folder. Her hand paused on one page, a bank transfer authorization. It had my forged signature at the bottom. I said quietly, "You should have changed the pen color. Blue ink doesn't match Mom's paperwork." Her face drained of color. My sister Linda said, "You think you're smarter than me?" I answered, "No. Just slower to trust." The ticking of the clock filled the silence between us. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered above the screen. My sister Linda said, "If you don't sign, I'll release something that'll make you regret this." I asked, "What could you possibly have left?" She said, "Letters. From Mom. Ones you never saw." I leaned forward. I replied, "The ones you wrote yourself?" That was the moment she understood. Her expression changed, a flicker of realization then fear. My sister Linda said, "You recorded this, didn't you?" I answered, "I learned from you. Always have a copy." The color drained completely from her face. She stood up fast, chair scraping the floor. My sister Linda said, "You won't get away with this." I replied, "I already have." She stormed toward the door, but before she could leave, the sound of tires on gravel broke through. A car pulled into the driveway, silver sedan, government plates. 2 officers stepped out, followed by Detective Rivera. Detective Rivera said, "Linda Hale? We have a warrant for your arrest, fraud, document forgery, and financial exploitation." My sister Linda said, "You can't prove it." Detective Rivera replied, "You just did." He pointed to the small blinking red light under the table. Linda froze. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. They read her rights slowly. When they walked her out, she didn't fight, just kept her head down. The house was silent again once the door closed. I sat there, the sound of the clock ticking steady, calm, almost peaceful. The lavender box still sat open. Inside, one of Mom's old photographs had shifted. The 3 of us together, long before greed took over. Detective Rivera came back inside. He said. It's over, Mrs. Hale. We'll handle the rest. I answered. No, detective. It's just finally balanced. When he left, I stayed seated, the faint hum of his car fading down the road. The air smelled of lavender again, not from the box but from the past. I closed the lid gently and whispered. She thought this house would be her victory, but it was her mirror. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the river, and in the stillness that followed, I could almost hear my mother's voice again. The truth will wait. A week passed before I walked back into my mother's room. The curtains were half drawn, the air faintly sweet, a mix of dust, rain, and lavender that had soaked into the wood over the years. The silence was different now. It didn't accuse anymore. It exhaled. Detective Rivera had stopped by that morning. He said, "It's settled, Mrs. Hale. Your sister's facing charges on multiple counts. The caretaker confirmed her part in writing. You won't have to testify unless you choose to." I replied, "I'll let the papers speak. They're better witnesses than I ever was." He smiled faintly. "Not many people handle this with grace." I answered. "Grace comes after grief. Takes longer to find." After he left, I made tea the same way Mom used to, with 1 sugar cube and a slice of lemon. I carried the cup upstairs, set it on the vanity beside her old brush set. The mirror still held the faint reflection of the woman I'd been before all this began. I opened the lavender box for the last time. Inside were only a few things now: a ribbon, the photo of all 3 of us, and that last letter with her handwriting fading to gray. The paper had softened at the folds, but I still knew every word by heart. If they rush you, slow down. The truth will wait. She was right. It waited quietly, stubbornly, until it couldn't be ignored. I closed the box gently and wrapped it again with the same piece of twine. Then I placed it back on the top shelf of the wardrobe. Not hidden, just home. Later that day, Mr. Collins stopped by with the final documents. He said, "The house is officially yours, Margaret. The accounts are restored. Everything's secure now." I asked, "And Linda?" He replied, "Her attorney requested a reduced sentence. But with the recordings, the bank evidence, and the caretaker's statement, there's little room left for leniency." I said, "She'll have plenty of time to think. Maybe she'll finally slow down." When he left, I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. The kind of calm that comes only when something heavy has finally been set down. That evening, I walked out onto the porch. The magnolia tree was in bloom again, white petals glowing against the darkening sky. The same wind that once carried her laughter now carried only the rustle of leaves. I sat there until the light faded, the gold watch in my palm. It hadn't ticked in years. Still, I wound it once gently. And for a moment, one brief stubborn second, it moved. Then stopped again, exactly where it always had, 10-12. I smiled. I whispered, "That's enough." Inside, the house creaked softly, not from age but from settling, like it had been holding its breath all this time. People think justice is loud, that it slams doors and shouts in courtrooms. But they're wrong. Justice is quiet. It sits in a chair by the window, watching the sun rise over the same street it's seen 1,000 times. It doesn't need applause. Just the truth, written, signed, sealed, and left where it belongs. I poured myself another cup of tea. The lavender scent still lingered in the steam, and for the first time in months I didn't look over my shoulder. Mom's voice felt close, not like memory but like air. Something that never really left. "You don't have to win, my darling. You just have to stop losing yourself." I looked at the watch one last time, its still hands catching the evening light. Then I placed it inside the lavender box, closed the lid, and turned off the lamp. In that small, perfect silence, the house finally exhaled. And so did I. Subscribe if you enjoyed the story. New stories every day on RevengeVeil.